Hello and welcome back. Or if this is your first time here, my name is Siobhan and I'm happy to have you. And today we're going to talk about chronic fatigue. I have been struggling to make video because I've been struggling to be awake. And when I am awake, I feel pretty achy. So I'm going to talk about chronic fatigue. And it felt like having a video specifically dedicated to it when I bring it up so often in my videos seems like the right thing to do. If you've been around for any amount of time or even potentially only seen one of my videos, you probably know that I have chronic fatigue. And I want to say, disclaimer right from the beginning, I was diagnosed by a doctor. I am not a medical professional. I am not diagnosing anybody with chronic fatigue. I am not suggesting that anybody else who is experiencing the same things as me has chronic fatigue. While I'm doing this video, I'm going to perhaps attempt to do something with what is on my head. I literally just woke up. It is 2:12 in the morning. And this video needs to be up in 8 hours. So this is not the video that I had planned. And the video that I did plan for today is actually the video that I had planned for 4 days ago. And I just haven't made it because of chronic fatigue. So that's why this video is going to exist. Also, I love this robe, but it is real warm in this room. I am wearing a cami top. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. I'm not going to take this all the way off. I'm just going to open it so that I'm not dying. My hair has been up in this bun for like 3 days. I'm going to try to explain as best I can my experience with chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is really just what they diagnose you with when they don't have a pinpoint diagnosis for why you can't stay awake or why you're fatigued all the time. In my case, they do think that I have narcolepsy type 2. For an official diagnosis, there was an in-person study. So I did a sleep study. There was one more sleep study that I had to do for them to do an official diagnosis. And then I no longer had health insurance and coronavirus happened. And so getting in to see a doctor and do the sleep study has just not been priority for me. And also, wow, look at that rat's nest. Also with narcolepsy type 2. So the testing out of pocket, very, very expensive to go and do a sleep study. You go into a clinic where you are there, you stay. So for narcolepsy, the way that the sleep study works is, at least in my experience, was you go, you stay there overnight, and then you have to stay into the day, and then you have to take a nap. So they have to know basically how long you're able to stay awake before you nap and how quickly you fall asleep, and there's just a bunch of stuff with it. When I was a kid, like a small kid, I was not a kid who would wake up for Saturday morning cartoons, and I would sleep well past noon if somebody didn't make me get up. And then I would still lay down and take a nap like any normal kid, usually sometime in the late afternoon, early evening. And then I would usually go to bed around like 10 p.m. Most children would not then sleep until noon or 1 p.m. the next day. Most kids are still going to wake up in the morning. They might be a little tired and cranky, maybe take an extra nap. But that was just like, that was pretty common for me. And I also, if we took the car anywhere, I would sleep in the car and struggle to wake back up in like a meaningful way afterwards. So that was my experience as like a small kid. And then when I got a little bit older, so like 10, 11, 12, I had a lot of sleepovers, or I would go to a lot of sleepovers because that's a thing kids used to do. I don't know if that's even a thing kids do anymore. I don't ever hear kids talking about sleepovers. But I would be at a sleepover or have a sleepover, and I was always the first kid to fall asleep and the last kid to wake up. I put in a little bit of dry shampoo. We're going to let that do its magic while I record the rest of this video. So at sleepovers, it wasn't just like I would be the first one who would be like, okay, guys, it's time for bed. I would want to stay up and do things as much as every other kid, but I just couldn't. I would get to the point where I was dozing off. It would make it so that I was so tired I wasn't having fun anymore. And I was making it not fun for other people. Or sometimes it would just be like I would literally fall asleep while I was trying to interact with other kids. And I would fall asleep on the couch. I would fall asleep on the floor. Like, I would fall asleep in just like these random places because I was trying to do whatever the other kids were doing, which was also always kind of disorienting to fall asleep without really intending to while there's a bunch of stuff going on around you, and then waking up and it's just like dark and there's nobody. Or maybe there's a hall light on, but you realize that like everybody's gone to bed. Or they're in another room doing stuff and you're by yourself, but you can like hear distant noises where like the scene has just completely changed, but it doesn't really, like, you have that feeling like you just kind of blinked, or maybe you were asleep for a couple of minutes when in reality it's been hours. And so I would have that sort of weird disorienting feeling. It would make me feel kind of ill, but also I would still just, it would be such a struggle to be able to actually wake up out of that. So sometimes I would manage to, like, if I was at someone else's house, get to like my sleeping bag or wherever I was supposed to be sleeping, or if I was at home, get into my bed. But I would have that. I would fall back asleep within minutes, and then I would also sleep well past when everyone else woke up. Usually at sleepovers, people would start waking up around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times if I was at a sleepover on a Friday night, people would want to wake up and watch Saturday morning cartoons. I know I keep talking about this and people probably don't know what it is. Back before everything was streamed, on Saturday morning, there was a block of cartoons, usually starting at like 6 or 7 in the morning until noon. And so that was Saturday morning cartoons. And so all the other kids would wake up to watch Saturday morning cartoons or to have breakfast or do whatever. And usually by the time I woke up and got out of bed, everybody was gone except for me. So either I was at whomever's house and all of the other kids had left and I was the last one, or a lot of times in those situations, they would wake me up and tell me like, hey, your mom's here to get you at like 10 o'clock in the morning or something when all the kids are supposed to be leaving. And I would get up and get in the car, fall asleep in the car, go home and take a nap. Go home and sleep more. And if it was at my house, usually by the time I woke up, everybody was just gone. So it wasn't like I was missing out on a lot as a kid. And really throughout my whole life, I feel like I've missed out on a lot. As a teenager in school, I would go to school, I would go home, I would take a nap, I would wake up, do whatever, and then usually be in bed and asleep by like 10 o'clock. So when I got out of school was when coffee really became a thing. I started hanging out with my older brother. We would go to coffee shops, and I would wake up very late in the evening or night, and we would go to coffee shops, and I would be at coffee shops drinking coffee. And after 4 or 5 hours, and yes, we used to hang out for that long. And a lot of times it wasn't really coffee shops. It was like diners, sort of. Places like Denny's, except usually it wasn't Denny's. It was just places that are like that. Like 24-hour restaurants. And I would be drinking coffee and still fall asleep in the booth because caffeine was not enough to keep me awake. At that point, I was dealing with my menstrual issues, which is a whole other story. But doctors thought that it was a combination of my menorrhagia and the fact that I was a teenager that was making me so tired all the time. And so after that, really it stayed that way for a very, very long time. Stayed that way really into most of my adult life, where I, in my early 20s, just lived off of caffeine. And when I say I lived off of caffeine, I mean I lived off of caffeine. I worked in coffee shops, and so I would drink, and I could easily drink 3 Red Bull and 4 or 5 lattes and some cold brew and still go home and go to sleep when I got off. Like, that was just what I needed to get through the day. After coffee shops and working retail, where at least I was like up and moving around and doing stuff, I got a job working in banking and working in a fraud department. So very much like land of cubicles, office type setting. And it meant that I sat at a computer for my entire shift. And I can't tell you how many times I was at the computer and like doing something, actively doing something, and struggling to stay awake for an 8-hour shift, which shouldn't happen. And it wasn't, I would have gotten 12 hours of sleep the night before, and getting 12 hours of sleep wasn't enough to keep me awake for 8 hours. I associated it with other medical things that I had going on. And so once a lot of the other things that could be underlying causes, and obviously teenager, that just, you get older. But some of my other medical stuff was sort of stabilized, and the fatigue hasn't gone away at all. I have been unemployed for a while. If you want to know exactly how long, you can go back and watch my videos and figure it out. But during unemployment, it's been very much how just like my weekends used to be. And I sleep in a very irregular pattern. In one of my videos, I went over like what my sleeping had been. I'll try to remember to link it down in the description. But I sleep sometimes, like, there was a day this previous week where I slept for 20 hours. 20 hours. And not like I was just waking up and trying to like not get up and like rolling around in bed. I slept for 20 hours. I got up once during that 20 hours to use the restroom and got another drink of water and went back to sleep. And just like, again, things become so disorienting. And for me, a lot of times it's just like, I have no concept right now of when is day or night. And when I fall asleep and it's light and I wake up and it's light, I sometimes don't know if it's the same day or not. Sort of frequently don't know if it's the same day or not. Migraines don't help anything, because if a migraine is coming on, I want to be asleep through like the medication kicking in. It's made it very difficult in many situations for me to have any kind of a social life, because I'm tired all the time. And even though I have maybe 4 or 5 hour blocks, I don't know when they're going to happen. Anything in my room, I have done all of the cutting out of caffeine. I've tried to have a regular schedule. Having a regular schedule is just torture. Like, it's literally just torturing myself. It's saying, I know that I need to sleep. I'm achy. I feel awful. I can't keep my eyes open, but I'm going to do everything I can to force myself to stay awake for another 5 hours, because that's supposed to be my bedtime. And then on the flip side of that, going to bed at my bedtime. So like if it's 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., going to bed at 11 p.m., at 11 p.m., I've struggled for hours to stay awake. And then at 7 a.m., I'm dragging myself out of bed. I don't feel good. I am not energized in any way. And then I feel awful all day long. I might let myself take a nap. I'll wake up from my nap, maybe feel okay for an hour, and then I'm just struggling again. And it's just not a fun life. Unless I have something that I have to do, I sleep when I need to sleep, and I'm awake when I am naturally awake. Which, for me, I will rarely have days when I will be awake for like 12 hours, but more often I'm awake for 4 or 5 hours and then I sleep. And sometimes I'll sleep for 3 hours and sometimes I'll sleep for 16 hours. I just don't know how long I'm going to sleep for. And then when I'm awake, I don't know how long I'm going to be awake for. I drink a ton of water, because water also can cause fatigue. Well, lack of water can cause fatigue. I am really regular about my medication. I try to take it as close to the same time every day as possible. Basically, it's whenever I am awake close to that time. Usually, I'll get up within an hour or so on one side or the other and need to go to the bathroom or something. And I've been doing it long enough that I do have an internal clock that has regulated me to kind of like be like, okay, I need to wake up. And I've tried to then use that as like I'm gonna stay up, and I fall asleep on the couch if I try to do that. So sometimes I'll wake up and it'll be the beginning of my day, but usually it's not how it works. But I really do everything that I can. So just in general. So what is chronic fatigue like? Chronic fatigue is like when you've been awake for, think of the longest time you've ever stayed awake. And when you've gotten to that point where you just like everything feels kind of distant, and you're tired and you can't keep your eyes open and you can't focus on anything. So imagine that happening when you've only been awake for 4 or 5 hours. And then when that happens and you go to sleep and you wake up and you feel kind of like you have a hangover, you still feel a little bit groggy and a little bit nauseous and everything is just achy. That's what it feels like when I wake up most of the time. And some of that is also I have endometriosis, which adds its own layer of pain. Again, different video. If you have chronic fatigue, I'm totally interested in hearing about your experiences. If you know somebody with chronic fatigue, one of my biggest messages that I want to be a takeaway from this video is that it's not being lazy. I'm not lazy. There are things that I desperately want to do. There are things that I will start doing, and I just run out of energy so quickly. A lot of times I physically feel like I could do more, but I'm so tired. I have such an extreme exhaustion that I just can't function. And I have to sleep in order to let my brain reset itself and get to where it needs to be for me to be able to continue whatever I'm doing. I take my channel very seriously. I very much want to be able to put out quality content for you. And when I miss an upload, I feel like I've let people down. And that's something else that happens with chronic fatigue, is that it can also spiral into depression. And depression comes with a lot of the same symptoms and issues as chronic fatigue. Definitely, when I'm depressed, I just don't get out of bed at all, because the added exhaustion on top of having chronic fatigue just kind of makes existing impossible. So, yeah, I hope that some of this information helped. I know it's just really my experience with chronic fatigue and likely narcolepsy type 2, but it is something that I think people don't really understand or think about from an outside perspective. And I can't tell you how many times in my life people have accused me of being lazy, or of just not wanting to do things, or being a bad friend. And it's so much more than that. And if you know somebody who seems like maybe they're having the same kind of issues that I've talked about, maybe talk to them about talking to their doctor if they haven't. Because I didn't talk to my doctor about a lot of these things because I just assumed that it was because of other medical issues that I was having. And so I would bring up that I was tired all the time, but I didn't tell my doctors the extent for years of what it was really like. So just try to be considerate and compassionate in life, with friends. Just try to be a considerate, compassionate person. Then life will be better. If we were all considerate and compassionate, imagine how much more amazing the world would be. Okay, I need to make another video, and it's been a half an hour. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up here. If you're still here, please subscribe. If you've listened to me talk for this long, there's no reason not to, because clearly you enjoy hearing me talk. And I try to post every Wednesday and Saturday. I'm working on it, I swear. I just sleep so much. It's stupid. It's a stupid, stupid thing. Thank you so much for being here, for supporting me. I hope that you are having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening.